Ullyot with us now. He is the former National Security Council spokesman and former deputy assistant to President Donald Trump. Good morning to you, sir. As always, President Biden meeting with Mexico's president, as Nancy laid out, just a few hours from now. How would you characterize the relationship between these two countries and these two world leaders right now?
Well, Marni, it's actually an open question right now because AMLO, or President López Obrador, had a very good relationship with President Trump, which is actually something that is a little bit counterintuitive because President Trump is from a different persuasion. He's more nationalist focused. López Obrador, even though somewhat of a nationalist, he's also to the left in his sphere, in his country. And so, but they had a mutual respect where they were able to meet across the table and have a different approach whenever they could, but still respecting each side. With President Biden, there's been a fraught relationship really over semantics because the policy differences are actually in favor of Mexico because, for example, President Biden is accepting more migrants into the U.S., to say the least. I mean, he's at 8 million on his watch, which we could talk about in a second. But the fact is that the way that impacts the relationship is that President Trump actually had the Remain in Mexico policy. That's no longer the case with Mexico and with López Obrador. But Biden, by even giving some slack to AMLO on the border, he has had a tense personal relationship that would have actually, up until just a few days ago, the Mexican president was not even going to come to the APEC. So this is something that hopefully they'll be able to iron those differences out and talk about major policy that we can talk about shortly.
Right. And he may not have shown up this time. He backed out the last time about a year ago with a face-to-face meeting. Let's talk about immigration since you left off there. What would the U.S. consider positive progress coming from this discussion on immigration and some of the numbers we're seeing of border crossings illegally?
Well, there's really a problem of our own enforcement of our borders because the deal that President Trump had was a Remain in Mexico deal that President Biden is not pushing the Mexicans for right now, not pushing López Obrador for. So what you would have here is you would have essentially there's been a small trickle of money that Biden has been able to give to Mexico in order for them to hold back some very few, about 30,000 a month of migrants, which is nothing compared to the 200,000+ that are coming over our border. Those are the apprehended migrants. So in terms of the main thing that President Biden can do is build on what his agreement was with President Xi and then get some real crackdown on the fentanyl issue, as opposed to stemming the migration, because Biden really has not made that a priority and we don't see him doing that going forward. But if he can get some real progress on the deadly fentanyl that's coming over the border, that is something that, number one, is an objective of his meeting, and number two, would make a real dent in a sincere problem in our country that takes about 80,000 lives a year, unfortunately.
Yeah, and how much momentum does Biden have going into this meeting, given the fact that in the last 48 hours, he has secured an agreement with China on the manufacturing of fentanyl, which is supplying Mexico, where then it's being made, crossing into the border. Does that discussion and the agreement he had with President Xi help in his conversation with Mexico's president this afternoon?
Absolutely. It shows a united front, Marni, at least with the two countries, the country that's most affected, obviously the U.S., and the manufacturer of most of the fentanyl, but really the Mexican immigrants or the Mexican cartels are the ones who bring the fentanyl over to the United States. So these cartels are absolutely something that López Obrador wants to crack down on. I think what you'll see at the end of the day is possibly some extra funding for him to crack down there. But I just return, Marni, to the issue that President Biden, by not stemming the illegal immigration into this country, that allows for the traffic of fentanyl. So the Mexican president, as well as Xi, can be united with Biden about limiting that. But as long as you have the cartels who can walk over our border just like everybody else, that's where you're going to have the impact on the U.S. society. And so he needs to crack down on the border, period, and not wait for Mexico or or President Xi to join him in stemming fentanyl. It's an immigration issue, not so much of a drug supply issue.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.